It's a new year, and that means it's time for another Netflix series adaptation of a Harlan Coben mystery. This time, surprisingly, Runaway doesn't star Richard Armitage, but it does feature the return of James Nesbitt. Is this going to be another dud in the mystery franchise, or is it going to surprise you? Simon had the perfect life, a loving wife and kids, a great job, and a beautiful home. But then his eldest daughter, Paige, ran away, and everything fell apart. Now his search to find her will take him into a dangerous underworld, revealing deep secrets that can tear his family apart forever. In addition to James Nesbitt, this stars Ruth Jones, Minnie Driver, Maeve Courtier-Lilly, Lucian Matmati, John Pointing, Alfred Enoch, Annette Badland, Amy Gledisel, Ellie DeLange, and Ellie Henry. One thing about the cast before I continue, it has to do with Ellie Henry. She plays the youngest daughter of Nesbitt and Driver. And all throughout the show, we see her both in a wheelchair and then walking around without one. There's no explanation for this, and while it's not hugely important for the story at all, it was distracting because nothing was ever said about it. So I looked her up. Ellie Henry has epilepsy, for which she's now become a part-time wheelchair user. Now, I think it's awesome that she's an advocate for epilepsy awareness. I just think had the show chosen to work that bit in, even just with a simple line or two of dialogue, it could have amplified the awareness even more, and then not left those of us watching wondering why it was that the actress was inconsistent in their ambulatory modes. All right, enough about that, but the series is 8 episodes long, so it's a bit of a healthy binge. But unlike several of the more recent Coben adaptations, this one hooked me in, and it intrigued me with both the characters and the story. Now, the main arc centers around a runaway daughter who shows up one day in front of her dad and then disappears again, but now with horrid circumstances surrounding her disappearance. There's a grisly murder in which she could be the suspect, but it's not so cut and dry, meaning there are several potential culprits that are introduced, and all of them come across as plausible thanks to the character backgrounds we get and then some of the sketchy behaviors that they display. But then there are multiple tangents that are thrown into the mix. Some of them add a lot of intrigue, but also a massive question as to how this has anything to do with the main plotline. Now, for instance, we're introduced to a couple of roaming assassins. They're cold and calculated, which I thought was excellent for some baddies. Way too often we get the hemming and hawing from villains. This, though, nope, the decision has already been made, and like Anton Chigurh, your end is going to be quick and decisive. There's also this vigilante angle that's inserted, and while it's easier to see how this may tie together, it adds another layer of complexity that sometimes threatens to distract from the runaway story. And we're also introduced to a private investigator. Now, her storyline takes on 2 different tangents. I wasn't a fan of her for much of the show. The character's abrasive, very intrusive, and there was just something about her demeanor that made her feel off. But as we learn more about her, the motivations and then explanations for certain behaviors, they make more sense, and she began to grow on me as a sympathetic and useful character within the mystery. But with all of these tangents, they work to add more time to the narrative. Are they all necessary? Probably not. And they did feel like some odd insertions in the first half of the show. But when taken as a whole, the larger story did benefit from these side quests. And everything does wrap around, so there is a connected string that prevents us from becoming a tangled and uninteresting mess. Now, there is one angle within the PI's arc that could have been omitted, and the story wouldn't have changed much. But this did work also to create some more background and emotion around her character. So in the end, it didn't seem like a waste. And while I did enjoy the ride this whole show takes us on, early on, I was struggling a bit to want to continue. And that was due to all those tangents that I just mentioned. What kept me going was the heart of the main story. A dad working desperately to find his daughter. And Nesbitt gives us some good range. He's not always likable, but he can certainly be relatable. We watch him make frustrating decisions, sometimes out of impatience, but other times just simply because he's so entrenched in his grief and regret. And this area of the story helped maintain the connection to the storytelling. We watch vulnerable people getting caught up in circumstances and then others attempting to help resolve those situations, but not always handling things correctly. Sometimes also making things drastically worse. Now, the acting in this was engaging, creating a hugely diverse set of characteristics. Some we were clearly meant to root against, like the roaming assassins, but I found myself captivated by the strange relationship that they shared. It's not like it was some massively profound dependency they had with one another, but the dynamic was predictably unhealthy while also building towards some kind of train wreck. Now, Minnie Driver probably had it easiest for their show. Her character just didn't have too much to do, which was also a bit odd to have a larger named actress playing a character whose role was minimized. There you go. And we also follow two investigating detectives, and while they also have an odd relationship, they have an intriguing dynamic. But a lot of it doesn't really enhance, or harm for that matter, the whole story. It just adds a bit more time and then some different opportunities to provide story clarification or insight. The final frames of the series, I thought they were kind of strange. I rewound the final scene twice, just to make sure I hadn't missed a line of dialogue or maybe some visual clue. But the ending looks we get from a character almost seem like there's more to be shown, a questioning and pondering expression on their face. Now, I understand the sentiment and the emotion that's coursing through them just thanks to the conversation that was just prior to the scene, but it was a bit of an odd way to conclude the show. And it didn't end up hurting the intrigue or the overall plot, and we had been given all the reveals before this. It just kind of felt weird. Speaking of the mystery itself, I think some of it is obvious, but because there are so many different arcs playing out simultaneously, I'm not sure each of them will be as predictable just thanks to the lack of some of the information that's not provided until a reveal comes. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this series. The story is convoluted enough to create several different compounding arcs while still maintaining a certain straightforwardness so we don't get lost in the crisscrossing. The show could be trimmed a little with the reduction of certain tangents, but the pacing is efficient, containing several exciting twists that keep the momentum flowing. With heartbreaking and maddening storylines, the actors create some uniquely varied personalities, providing the story with a good mix of heroes, villains, and anti-heroes. This is one of the better Harlan Coben adaptations, and if you are in the mood for an enticing mystery, put this one on your list. There's no sex or nudity, ton of profanity, and then a bunch of violence. I give Harlan Coben's Runaway 4 out of 5 couches. Okay, what are some shows or maybe films that you're looking forward to seeing in this new year? I would love to hear what makes your list in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.